Well, it did actually happen. The prophecies were true, and after 15 years of only looking from afar, I got to officially join the fun. And against all odds, Riot let me write some lore for one of their canonical universes. Which does technically make me the most unofficial writer there is. And so now I can proudly say that one of the most interesting pieces of Riot's lore will be nested in TFT for all eternity. And the entire process of how that happened was quite interesting. So why don't we go on a little bit of a journey? This all started roughly in the second quarter of 2025. Which is where I got to have a call with a few writers, and that's where they showed me the name of set 16 of TFT as well as the entire theme. Now, since the set was about lore and legends, I did get a vague idea of what might be possibly happening. I assumed that maybe Necrit could be a cool unit in TFT, I mean they are making their own new models now. Or maybe there could be some other kind of integration happening. But what I did not expect is them asking me if I would be down to write some lore for them. Because yes, with this set, the opportunity was perfect. And perfect it was. But we'll get to that. First, it was time to wait till summer. That is when I got to hop on the classic 10-hour-long flight into the Riot headquarters. And yes, I had to go there physically because it was lining up with some other things. And for context, because there were so many events happening this year, that was my third time with that flight. Which means, thankfully, my body is immune to jet lag now. And if you're asking how I managed to deal with it, well, I played 10 hours of Silk Song on that flight. And then I slept at the hotel for 12 hours. But the next day I was reset and everything was completely fine. And so the working began. Now, we'll get to the writing in a moment, because first there was another thing we had to tackle. This was the reason why I had to be there physically. That's right, if you've seen either the teaser video for set 16 or the entire reveal video, you might have noticed me. And yes, I am holding the mic the classic Necrit style. But the point is, that was not a green screen. That was actually me. And let me tell you something about it. This was the moment I realized TFT is likely doing really well behind the scenes. Because the production was crazy. It wasn't just any kind of a devlog being recorded. We're talking about a proper set that was built inside the TFT office, with a full production crew and a proper director. I'm telling you, there is no difference between recording a Netflix series or a blockbuster movie and a TFT dev drop. And it honestly felt amazing and I loved every moment. There was a proper script, there was proper acting, and yes, that also meant makeup. I can tell you that was the first time I ever had makeup on. But more importantly, let's talk about those pants. You might have noticed, I've never had those pants in any of my videos, and oh boy do I have a lot of pajama pants. You see, because this was a whole proper production, they also had their own wardrobe. Now, when I marched in, because I knew something would be happening, I brought my own blue pajama pants. Which was an issue, because then I learned that in the next scene we would be using blue screen, so blue pajama pants were not ideal. The problem was, their wardrobe was not prepared for someone to be wearing pajama pants. And so the only pants they had that resembled pajama pants were these. And yes, at the end of the recording, they told me I can keep these. So these are my TFT pants now. And so, with me finally ready, the first scene that was recorded was this one. And yes, I basically told the director, hey, can I hold a lav mic in my hand? Even if it's not plugged in, that's what I do in my videos, and I thought it would be funny. And they agreed. And so they gave me a fake mic to hold. But that's when we got to our first break, which means it was time for our first break. And lo and behold, when we got to their cafeteria, we found the Necrit peach tea, which apparently was made out of real honey fruit. But yes, on that day, anyone at Riot would be able to drink my tea. And so now it makes sense why Riot randomly asked me what's my favorite drink to drink. And so then it was time for day 2, which started in a hilarious way. The recording for the second day started at 7 in the morning. And so we had to be at Riot at 7. Now, you need to understand that the entirety of LA wakes up at 11 for some reason. Like I'm telling you, that's when all the shops actually open. You will not see a living soul in the streets up until like 10. And so when I say we had to be at Riot at 7 in the morning, that was like a middle of the night to them. And so at 6:30 we were at Riot, and there was nobody. All the headquarters were empty, which got us really confused because we thought something was supposed to be happening there. And then, completely randomly, as we walked around the office looking for someone, we found Mordog at 6:30 at Riot. He was just there on his computer, working. That person is a working ethic menace. But yes, then we found out that the recording was happening in a building next to Riot. So we moved there and our second day of recording started, which meant the classic makeup first and acting performance later. And that's when I can point out, this was the moment I technically learned Zahen's name about 6 months before he was revealed. Like, no one ever talked about it, no one mentioned it. But yes, I was standing on the set next to a person that was casually name-dropping Zahen.
You may even be able to field League's new champion, the ultra-powerful, ultra-enlightened Darkin, Zahen.
But yes, the entire set was awesome, there was a lot of physical props on a blue screen, and I had so much fun with my pretend acting. I did also get an applause after I finished recording my final scene, which made me feel like a rat that accidentally stumbled into a Hollywood set. But then we were done with the recording, which gets us to the second part of the journey. Now, technically, there was also a small third part, because while we were at Riot, 2XKO was launching, and so there was a massive party next door, but we did not have time to have a look at that. Anyway, then it was time to write. Now, the writing process was quite interesting because it was a real official deal. And so I was given a topic, or in this case, I was given a part of TFT's universe to focus on, after which the writing cycle began. First, there was brainstorming, then we had to focus on the deliverables, then we took a break to have everything settle in, after which we came back and we put together the final result, which is where we should talk about what I actually wrote about. It turns out, TFT's universe works quite differently from the League of Legends universe. And that is because the TFT universe is essentially a multiverse. And that is what the Convergence is. Pengu and all the other little legends are the heroes who travel across the Convergence by hopping through portals and exploring the vast multiverse, where, in theory, you would be able to find versions of the canonical Runeterra, which is exactly what the new set is focusing on. But throughout the entirety of TFT's existence, there is one thing that just never got to have its own lore, and that's the river sprites. How is it possible that the first little legend to be part of the TFT universe never got its own backstory? And that is despite the fact that the river sprite has many different versions now. We don't know what these are, we don't know what they are doing, and we don't know where they came from. And so, that's what I got to deal with. Long story short, I became the official author of the river sprite lore. But the twist is, I won't tell you what the lore is. You see, if there is something I always loved in the League of Legends universe, it is the moments where you are given somewhat of a vague lore, where the best part is hidden behind a veil. The best example of this is the demonic lore of Runeterra. When Fiddlesticks came out, it was really cool to read about how Fiddlesticks works as a demon. But the juiciest part of the demonic lore was hidden in the compendium, or in the poem that talks about a maw that devoured the rest. That is where you can technically learn about the origin of demons, but no one really managed to crack it. And because I loved that lore hunting moment so much, that's what I did here. The lore I wrote for the river sprites was designed in such a way so that you would have to piece it together. And it turns out there were a lot of places for me to hide the breadcrumbs. From little legends descriptions, to flavor texts, to emote descriptions, to the loading screen tips. There was simply a lot of playground to play with the result being that if you want to learn about the sprites, including where they came from, as well as the lore of something that might be yet to come, you better look everywhere in the new set. What is also cool is that even though TFT is technically completely separate from the League universe, or at least the events of TFT can't affect League's canonical lore, in theory, TFT can still peer into the canonical universe of League. This means that I was able to set up a cool nod towards something else that was already written before. But if anyone manages to crack that one open, I would be mighty surprised. The best part is, as part of the writing process, all the material that I made will be archived for future potential use. Meaning that if Riot, for example, comes up with a new set that will be focusing on river sprites, I am making this up by the way, they would have to reach into the archives and pull out the lore that I wrote. Which makes me really excited. But that is essentially it. This is how Riot allowed me to write a piece of their canonical universe. And I loved every moment of it. Again, I wish I could tell you the exact story I wrote, but I would completely ruin the experience because I find it way cooler if the community finds it themselves. And so I would really like to thank the TFT team who allowed me to do this. In fact, I didn't ask for this. They told me to do it. It was their idea and they will pay the consequences. And as a result, I got one massive achievement for life. I can get my official page on the wiki because I am official author now.